So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to this cold weather, and thank you so much for joining us once again. We are live on Facebook, on YouTube, and also here on Zoom. We are discussing a very important and a very lovely topic tonight with one of the top and esteemed and illustrious speaker. I'll introduce him shortly. My name is Mazwe Majola. I'm from the Worldwide Institute of Leadership and Development. We are a research and training institute. We specialize in leadership. We always say we eat leadership, we sleep leadership, we drink leadership. We are leaders in leadership. You talk leadership, you talk about world. And thank you very much to those who have joined us for the very first time. You are so welcome, and please feel at home and feel free to participate. This is a community of scholars and of leaders. We as I'm saying that we really discuss leadership here. We meet every Wednesdays at 6 p.m. We started meeting on, I think it was on the 4th of August, 2020, in the midst of COVID, when we realized that all of us were very down and demotivated and demoralized. And we started this platform just to meet as leaders, to sharpen each other, to encourage each other, to learn from each other. We always say we meet here to learn, to unlearn and to relearn, and also to admonish each other, because as leaders, we need to tell each other where we are correct and where we go wrong, because we are leaders. As leaders, we are expected that we must always tell others, those who are our team members and those who are followers. But now as leaders, as peers, we need to, to encourage each other and to admonish each other where possible and where necessary. So we meet here where leaders talk to other leaders. I know that there are so many professors here and so many doctors, and immediately you hear the word professor, you think of a classroom. So this is not a classroom. This is a session of leaders and scholars from different universities, executives from different companies and organizations, including public sector and private sector. So you'll meet leaders here. So thank you so much. If you are joining for the first time, please feel free. This conversation, would like to hear from you, would like to learn from you. Don't be diffident, don't be shy, don't draw back, don't say, no, it's my first time, so I just want to hear what others are saying. We want to learn from you as well. And a particular welcome to our regulars and to our members who are here every Wednesday. We learn a lot from each other, and that is why we keep on coming every Wednesday here. People, they wonder, what is happening on Wednesday at 6 p.m.? What is happening? It's where leaders meet other leaders. So this is a safe space, so please feel free to express yourself. We are discussing tonight stewardship leadership, and that's exactly what has brought us together here. Is about stewardship leadership. Nothing else, nothing more. We just want to learn from each other. Obviously, being moved and being addressed by the speaker, and after that we will engage each other. So I don't want to waste any time, because we've got the most important person here, and then we want to give him as much time as possible, and then we'll learn from, we'll engage him once he has addressed us, and also we'll learn from each other as we always do. I'm so honored and I'm so humbled to introduce this brother of mine. I respect this person a lot. And I'm actually so humbled that he availed himself to speak to us here. It shows his humility in his tight schedule. He's a very busy person. Even tonight, he was telling me last night that it's a whole day. I mean, this meeting back, and then even right now you'll be rushing to another event. But in the midst of that, he made time and said, no, I'm not going to postpone this. I want to engage the leaders and I want to meet them. So it's a very, very humble leader. And also to show, I mean, that in our country, we always say this when we meet here, that we do have leaders in our country. We've got good leaders. And unfortunately, it's just that other people, they don't want to recognize that. So let me introduce our speaker, Mr. Edward Kieswetter. Mr. Edward Kieswetter is the commissioner at the Southern African Revenue Service, which is called SARS. He rejoined as SARS commissioner on the 1st May 2019. He had formerly served as the founding group executive of the SARS Large Business Center and High Net Worth Unit. And also he served as SARS Chief Operating Officer and also as Deputy Commissioner during the period 2004 until 2009. From 2010 to 2016, he was the Group Chief Executive for the Alexander Forbes Group Holdings, where after a successful turnaround, the company was listed on the JSE. Edward also held senior executive roles at FirstRand Banking Group and Eskom. Most recently, he managed his own investments and served on various boards, which amongst others included Transnet as a non-executive and as a chair of Technology Innovation Agency and lead independent, and also he served on Shoprite Holdings. He relinquished all these external roles when he took up the position as SARS commissioner in 2019. Edward's qualifications include a Master of Commerce in SA and International Tax Law, which he got with cum laude from Northwest University. He's also got an executive MBA from Henley Business School, a Master of Science in Education from the University of Western Cape, an honors degree in Mathematics and Science Education, also from the University of Western Cape, as well as a National Diploma in Electrical Engineering from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. In addition, Edward was awarded the prestigious African American Scholarship and an academic appointment as an associate in education at Harvard University in USA. He is the recipient of several awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award for Excellence in Management, which he got in 2017 from SAPSO. Also, as a finalist in the All Africa Business Awards in 2016, and an ACO Dealmaker of the Year in 2015, and also an SA Boss of the Year that was in 1999. That is Edward Kieswetter, the Commissioner of SARS, addressing us on stewardship leadership. Over to you, my Commissioner, and thank you so much for availing yourself. We love you. We are so proud of you, the work we are doing, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we would like to hear from you. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Majola. And it's certainly a privilege and indeed a pleasure, a joy for me to share this platform. And I share this platform and I speak not as an expert, but as a reflective practitioner and a lifelong scholar of leadership. I want to start my conversation by sharing with those who join us tonight and thanking them for joining us, that I have a theory of leadership, and it's a very simple theory of leadership. And it is this: firstly, that no one is entitled to lead. Secondly, that leadership is an inordinate privilege. You have in your sphere of influence a realm of influence that can materially touch the well-being of people. Leadership is not a title, but it is a set of behaviors. Fourthly, you cannot legislate followership. You have to inspire it. Fifthly, leaders must take their work seriously instead of taking themselves seriously. And lastly, leadership is about service to others. In other words, there can be no other purpose for leadership other than serving those, whether it is the people, the institutions, or the organizations that you lead. So what is a steward leader? Well, I understand it as follows: that steward leadership is about four things as key attributes. I'll come to behaviors later on, but attributes. Firstly, it is about understanding that we hold in trust that which does not belong to us, but that belongs to another. Secondly, that as a steward leader, we always place the interest of others above our own. Thirdly, that we do not set out to lead, but we set out to serve. And lastly, we nurture others to grow so that they themselves develop the desire to serve. And when we do this well, we bequeath something which is greater than what we inherited. And that becomes the incessant burning desire in a steward leader. And that's very important. Let me share with you in that regard the work we have done, and most recently, the work that we have done at SARS. You know the history, I don't have to share that with you, that SARS became a victim of state capture. And sadly, through a purpose which was not serving the higher purpose for which SARS was created, but rather had a corrupt intent, the organization was deliberately weakened, including the leadership structures. The well-tried and established organizational arrangements were dismantled. Ultimately, the social fiber of the organization was destroyed, and with it came a decline in revenue, a decline in morale of the employees, a decline in the confidence that South Africa ought to have in the revenue authority. And so an important piece of work as part of our change journey at SARS was to start with leaders. Leadership defines an organization, an institution, and a country. The world is in trouble today because we experience a dearth of leaders. We experience leaders who serve their own interest, who purport to serve the interests of others, but in fact, they are there for self-enrichment, self-gain. And I'm not just referring to South Africa, our troubled democracy. You see it around the world, where those who lead have much to account for. And so one of the first things we had to do was to be clear what would be the profile of an acceptable leader and what would the attributes be of such a leader. I want to share with you just two slides, if I may, Professor. And the one is a slide that is the culmination of 18 months of work, where myself plus the so-called top 70 leaders in the organization, we work together. Let me just share the slide with you, screen. We worked for 18 months together, and through a number of interactive engagements, we produced what we call the SARS leadership model. I've just taken a snapshot of this so that I can talk to it. The leadership model answers 3 questions. The first question it answers is, who am I? That is my personal proficiency, the skills I bring, and that which enables me to deliver. It is not the game. It is just the entry ticket to the game. And many leaders who fill certain positions, and when they fall short of those basic requirements of the job, the entire organization, institution, or area of responsibility suffers. The second question it answers is, what do I do? And the third question it answers is, what do I stand for? Which is ultimately the impact I have on others. So if you look at this model from the inside out, personal proficiency, that's my skills, my ability to deliver. The work I do is then, firstly, every leader must have some level of strategic competence. And the strategic competence is the ability to create a compelling vision that inspires the organization to follow, the ability to set out a path, a strategic intent, a clear roadmap, so that we can fly in formation. We are 12,500 people. We cannot each follow our own path. And so strategic formulation is an important part of what a leader does, no matter whether you're leading a small organization or team or a large multinational institution. Secondly, no strategy is worth anything if it cannot be executed. And so the execution of strategy, implementation, and we know in South Africa, we often have great ideas, great plans, but we have an implementation deficiency, which is why the delivery of social goods and services is so poor, and why we've not been able to close the poverty gap, the inequality gap, address the needs of people, the most vulnerable in society. Because it's not a lack of plans, it's a lack of implementation ability. Then thirdly, every leader must engage talent. Leaders work through others, and creating an environment that is engaging is very important. And then fourthly, every leader must invest in the future, build tomorrow's talent. And in the case of SARS, we have the several leadership forums, for example. We have a Women in Leadership program to stress the emphasis of women leaders. We have a junior board, which, for example, would stress the importance of the next generation leaders when we have reached, as some of us already have, our sell-by date. And then on the outer circle, you see 4 attributes that we hold dear, which is the third question. The first is our higher purpose orientation. And that's by being single-mindedly committed to the achievement of an idea, an ambition. But not an ambition for oneself, but an ambition for a cause. It is what John Collins speaks about as level 5 leadership. And so this is what we strive for. Our ambition is to create an institution called SARS that is smart and modern, and that can function beyond any criticism, beyond any reproach, and can be trusted and admired. But we balance that, which is almost a spiritual goal, with a very practical goal. And that's at the bottom of that circle, you see service obsession. And that is, we want to have an obsession with delivering the best taxpayer experience against clearly defined objectives and measurable results. And we seek to do that by creating a rhythm with fanatical discipline, a rhythm that balances positive and a optimistic look of the future with a realism of what are the challenges that faces us, and then an evidence-based implementation plan. In other words, we don't shoot from the hip, we look for evidence. And that, we believe, is what will transform the organization into a high delivery organization. That's how we believe we will best serve. Then on the two horizontal axes, you'll see on the right-hand side, stewardship. That's the point I made early on, that we are there to serve, and we are there to ensure that we leave an organization that is better than the one we found. And then care and growth, we borrow from the work of Etzko Skatema that says great leaders truly invest in the people they employ. They don't exploit them. They obviously exact contribution from them, but in return, there's a symbiosis that allows people to grow, to become the best version of themselves, so that in the delivery of their work, they also become better people. That is the leadership. That's what you see here on screen, is the work that we have done with the top 70 leaders of SARS. On the other slide, you can't read that, but this just unpacks each of those 5 attributes and describes what it is, describes what behaviors will support it, but also what behaviors will detract from it. Because I think ultimately what we hold dear as values must manifest as behaviors. I want to share with you one more picture of the impact and the behavior that steward leaders ultimately manifest. They concern themselves about 3 things. The first is they are always concerned about impact. They concern continually about the impact that their behavior has on others. They have a concern for impact. Secondly, they seek to clarify their intent and to re-clarify it when they think people have lost it. Thirdly, they inspire positive action. Fourth, they influence disbelievers, because not everyone believes. Those of us, as we have spent part of our life also in pastoral work and in the ministry, not everyone is a believer. And so you have to take them along. And so influencing believers is an important part of stewardship. We don't leave those people behind. Remember the story of the shepherd who went out to go and look for the one, even though he had 99 in the fold. And then they provide ongoing insight. In other words, they know that people become frustrated, people are filled with despair, people lose hope. And so they continually revive hope, they inspire and provide, they re-clarify the vision. And then lastly, they nurture interdependencies. They try to create 1,000 heroes instead of 1 or 2 rainmakers. So I call that the 6 I's of steward leadership. Concern for impact, clarity of intent, they inspire positive action, they influence disbelievers, they provide ongoing insight, and they nurture interdependency. Chair, I can continue to talk, but let me pause here and we can engage and start the conversation. And I'm sure with the contribution and questions of others, we can enrich the rest of the hour. Thank you very much. Let me hand back to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Kieswetter. Yeah, you've definitely moved us. And because I'm a leader with no jealousy, I don't want to spoil your speech. I'm not going to edit it or add or subtract, but I would like to give it to my colleagues. I mean, to engage you or to engage each other. I know that we are pressed with time. So I'm saying that, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm just warning those who let others to go first and say, no, I'll be the last one. Let me hear others. You may not get to that time. So I'll prefer that if you want to flood the commissioner now, we may do that. If I can see the hands already. Dr. Sipe Potelo, over to you, my doc. Let's start with you.
Good evening, Prof. I'm not sure if I'm audible. Good evening, Commissioner, and good evening to the fellow colleagues of Wednesday team. Commissioner, I would like to firstly to thank you for sharing your presentation with us, so profound. Also thanking you for availing yourself in a request by Professor Majola, of which that we know how busy is your schedule, but to join us on Wednesday today, to give us a taste, because I was still attentively listening, but even though there is a phrase that good dancers know when to leave the stage, but I think you have cheated us in one way or another, because we're still attentively schooled in this strategy and the position of leadership at SARS. Not per se at SARS in general, but you reminded me of when you started the definition of leadership by President of Kenya. President of Kenya was Mazwe Kibaki, yes, former president of Kenya. He said on leadership is a privilege to better the life of the others. He never stopped there. He further said, it is not an opportunity to satisfy personal greed. I close the quote. So on that opening of yours, it made me not to move and being inquisitive and learn more of the strategy of this stewardship in leadership. I don't have a question, but I'm paying a homage for yourself availability to share the stage in stewardship of leadership, with the hope that on those curiosity of your slides, we need more of your slides, not to share us with a small taste, to at least to give us enough time to learn more. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Perhaps another day I will get to question more about that. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you. Thanks, Doc. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doc. You are most generous. Thank you. Appreciate that. And we'd love to continue the engagement.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I see a hand there from, we'll take Professor Zide, Gordon Zide, and I see another hand from Vusima Bena, followed by Hanima Mbulo and Dr. Chuma Mangisa, in that order, please. I hope you'll remember. We start with Professor Zide, followed by Vusima Bena, who will be followed by Sis Hanima Mbulo, and then Dr. Chuma after that. Over to you, Prof.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Am I audible? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Prof, thank you very much for having invited the Commissioner to share such a very important topic with us. And indeed, I am where Dr. Mangisa is. It's a pity that time is often of essence. We would like to have engaged more with the Commissioner. But having said that, I want to request in the same manner as Dr. Mangisa has done, that the slides for this presentation be made available to us through your kind office, Prof. Majola. And having said that, the question to the commissioner is, without pointing finger to anyone, but it is public knowledge that in terms of general leadership in our country, be it business, be it politics, be it church, whatever, there is a general misunderstanding of what steward leadership is all about. And my own analysis is that steward leadership goes hand in hand with ethical leadership. And so the question to the commissioner is, how then can we make sure that we embrace both steward leadership and ethical leadership in order for the country to have a better leadership? Thank you.
Thanks, Prof. Zide. And so that was Dr. Potelwa. We're still going to get Dr. Kuba to come. No, that's fine. Commissioner, would you like to take that one from Prof?
Maybe if we can take just 2 more questions and then.
Yeah, exactly. No, wonderful. Thank you. That is much better. And then my brother there, Vusima Bena, over to you, sir.
Prof. Majola, thanks very much for the opportunity. It's a very rare occasion to engage with the caliber of Mr. Kieswetter's caliber. So thanks for the opportunity. You know, you spoke of stewardship, and you that as a leader you need to be a steward and all those attributes of a steward. You're sitting in a very, very politically influenced position as a commissioner. And I want to ask your insights into maneuvering yourself between the pressures of politics and leadership. Because those are some of the things that I know Prof. Zide speaks a lot about the decay in our political leadership. But my issue is, as the head of SARS, you are forever under pressure. And I heard you starting about corruption, that SARS became the victim. It meant that we needed a person who would sit there very objectively. And as a leader, I would like to get your insights into managing political leadership versus organizational leadership to serve the community as you are saying. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I'll take 1 more question, Prof. Majola, and then I'll respond.
Thank you, sir. So we can take Sis Honey, over to you, my sister.
Thanks, Prof. Mazwe. I think what a nice way to come back, listening to a very good presentation by the commissioner. My question, Commissioner, is a bit different in that I think from an organizational point of view, it's very clear that, you know, through your leadership styles, there's a certain focus on tax collecting. My question extends beyond your role as a leader. So on the one hand, you are a steward of our taxes, which is the only way that government earns income. Probably, I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer, but if you can try. You collect as a caretaker and steward of these government coffers. They come to you, through you, they get allocated. And then while we call it revenue, I guess it's revenue for the government, it gets abused. How does that stewardship role then show up to ensure that us, the employers who are paying taxes, still continue to believe it's worth our while? Because as middle class in South Africa and everywhere else, highly taxed, but when you then look, what are your taxes doing? Very little. I know you're in the middle here, but I'm interested to hear your view.
Thank you, Sis Majola. I'm going to probably combine the three questions because, and I'm going to start with my brother Vusi Mabena's question about how do you manage political pressures in the work we do. You know, there's a word that says, if you don't know what you stand for, you fall for anything. And so when I accepted this role, I made it clear to my political principles and to the organization that I was privileged to step into, where I stood. I wrote a letter. It was the 1st of May, 2019, and I'm sure that letter is discoverable. If not, and you're interested, we can share the letter with you. But I wrote a letter to every one of our staff members. It was personalized. It was May Day 2019. It was a public holiday. But myself and a few members who worked with me of the staff, and I wrote the letter, and before lunchtime on the first day, the letter went out. And the letter was very, very clear where I stood on matters of substance. Now, that was important. Secondly, my political principles knew from day one that I would not tolerate their interference into my work. When I was asked a question in Parliament sometime later about how I would respond to political interference, my answer was, I will not tolerate it, I would sooner resign. So I can tell you now, I will not get a phone call from any politician because they already know what the answer is going to be. And it brings me to Prof. Gordon's point about ethical leadership. One of the dimensions of leadership is to be authentic. And I believe none of us are perfect, but we can be authentic. And when you are authentic, you say what you mean and you mean what you say. Because ethical leadership is not about seeking agreement or consensus. Obviously, agreement and consensus is important when you try to lubricate the wheels of any organization. You can't have disagreement and discontent all the time. But they are not the primary objectives of one's leadership. And so to be authentic is where ethical leaders start. You are clear where you stand, you communicate that clarity to all your stakeholders, and you live to that truth, regardless of whether it is difficult, regardless of whether you may be abused for it, regardless of whether you think you never, as an ethical leader or an authentic leader, you never speak to what you think the audience would like to hear. You speak from conviction. And that is what makes you an authentic leader, not a perfect leader. And when you do things which you believe you have made an error of judgment, as we always do, or you may have overreacted, then have the humility to own up to it and say, I'm sorry. We find so many leaders today in our society who, despite having been caught with their hands in the cookie jar, will continue to waste resources, sometimes even public resources, to defend themselves. And they cannot, for a moment, accept accountability or ownership for what they have done. So for me, being a steward is not in contradiction, but it is assimilated with being ethical and being authentic. You know, I have referred early on to the good book, and there's so many wonderful lessons about the good book. And we know about the shepherd who is prepared to give his or her life for their sheep. And so for me, the essence of stewardship is about being authentic, about being driven by a cause. And I mean, the best example of it is someone who we know was just a human being among us, Rolihlahla, Nelson Mandela. He was not perfect. He was a man like every other man, but he was driven by a cause so big that whilst he lived to see it materialize, he was clear that he was prepared to die for it. And when I assumed this role, it wasn't because I thought that it would be an easy road. It was because I knew that I will hold my true north, regardless of the price it will cost. And the day I can no longer pay that price, I must leave. The issue and so embracing ethical leadership with stewardship is seamless. Embracing ethical leadership with authenticity is seamless. We spoke about level 5 leadership. Level 5 leadership is about having these two almost paradoxical qualities. On the one hand, this fearless resolve to achieve something worthy, balanced by the genuine humility that you cannot do it alone. You need other people. And I think that's what guides me in the work I do. In terms of coming closer to the point that was, so to finish off with Mabena's question, for me, I manage the political pressure in my work by not yielding to it, by not entertaining it, and by being clear where I stand on that. And for me, if those who are my political principles cannot respect or accept that, they need to find themselves another commissioner. It's as simple as that. My work, I often tell people, I am employed by government, but I work for South Africans. They hold me ultimately accountable, not government. And so to Hani Mabola's point, you know, this is one of my biggest dilemmas in my work, that we collect the money and we hand it over and often it is abused. Do you think I was happy when I had to deal with the immense corruption in the procurement of personal protective equipment? Millions and billions of rands that was hard earned and then just abused by others. So what do I do? Firstly, if I make a moral judgment about that, I would not be able to collect the money. Because I would say, why would I collect the money and hand it over and know that so much of it will be wasted or abused? So I keep my mind pure by understanding that my role is to do the best I can in the area that is assigned to me. Secondly, when I do become frustrated, I look to the higher purpose. I look to the impact of our work. And in our mind's eye, I see the granny, the gogo, who at the end of every month would be destitute without the social grant that she gets. We all know how many of those gogos feed themselves and 2 or 3 levels of an extended family. I see the young mother who is able to provide some basic sustenance for her kids, and she would be completely destitute without that. I see that we are able to provide the resources for schools with safe toilets so that little boys and girls don't live with the risk of losing their life simply by going to a toilet. I see the frontline workers able to provide healthcare during the time of COVID. And so what we do to keep us going when we try and deal with this conflict of revenue collection and revenue expenditure by reminding ourselves of the ordinary South Africans, the most vulnerable in society, whose lives are impacted by the work we do. And then when I do have the opportunity and I engage with my colleagues in government and with ministers in cabinet and other political office bearers, I remind them every day that unless they are able to give account as good stewards of the resources that they are privileged to work with, they make my work harder. So you're absolutely right, Ms. Majola, that South Africans feel entitled to fiddle with their taxes. They feel justified to withhold their taxes when they look at that. My message to them is, we'll have our opportunity to deal with the politicians when we exercise our democratic right. But in the meantime, if you withhold your taxes, you're not hurting government. You're hurting my mother, who is a pensioner, an 83-year-old pensioner. Many of your mothers who would be destitute without it. You're hurting that little boy and denying him or her from going to a good school. And so I encourage South Africans, pay your taxes, but hold government to account. That's how we're going to build a socially cohesive democracy, not by protesting and withholding our taxes. I hope that kind of wraps up the three questions, because they are all interconnected. Thank you, Professor Majola.
Thank you. Thanks, Commissioner. Let's continue with some engagement. So that was Dr. Chuma Mangisa, who's going to come in now. And then I saw a hand. I think Nkosi, I don't know, Nkosi, your hands are still up, but at some stage I saw Nkosi's hand, and then Nkosi would be followed by Manketsi, and then Manketsi would be followed by my sister there, Sis Patiswa, and then Sis Patiswa would be followed by Andre Young, in that order. Please, let's take Dr. Chuma for now. Thank you. Over to you, Doc.
Yes, thank you very much, Prof. Majola. And thank you to the SARS Commissioner. Only noble persons, stewardship, who speak in the manner in which the Commissioner has. Very few, when a politician calls, they don't normally succumb. They normally succumb to what the politicians are saying, but it is the opposite of what the SARS Commissioner has, told us today. But I have two questions. In fact, there would have been three, but I will lessen them only to two questions. When we study or talk leadership, it then ties in many other theories that motivate or that seek to motivate people. One theory, it is a theory by Hesbeck, a two-factor theory by Hesbeck, to say there will always be motivating factors and there will always be demotivating factors. And the two are talking or should be talking to each other. Now, I want to be practical here, Commissioner, to say currently now, as a majority union at SARS, there is a strike which is currently going on. And that strike, in as far as Hesbeck theory, it falls squarely under the demotivating factors or hygiene factors, meaning which in the absence of the demotivating factors, salary and wages in particular, there will ever be disengagement with employees. There will ever be disillusionment, with employees, particularly those at the bottom. Now, I add something that says, when we talk about stewardship, that says, serve me, I will lift you up. Serve me, I will lift you up, which we have touched on it, that you are not entitled, as a leader. You are there for a purpose, which is that of a higher purpose. Now, I want you to juxtapose that which I've said to your understanding of stewardship. And lastly, Commissioner, because of this how dispute which is currently happening, I want to ask you the buy-in of the employees into the leadership trajectory, the leadership model, which is very sound, that we have, unpacked to us. To me, I understand it very well. And any other strategist, or head of government would want to have this leadership trajectory or model. But I am concerned, therefore, of the buying in of this model. If Nehau comes in and begin to say, we are going to take SARS down, never mind, of the noble work that these workers are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chuma. And then he was followed by Nkosi. Nkosi, is your hand up?
Thank you, Professor. I'm covered by the previous speakers and the questions that have been raised by Dr. Chuma as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And then Manketsi.
Thanks, Prof, and good evening to the audience on the platform. Prof, I share the sentiment that Commissioner has robbed us a bit, as and when I was trying to connect the dots, he stopped, especially on the last 6 elements that he spoke about on Steward's leadership. Having said that, Prof, I would want Commissioner to help me with this practical situation. What is your take, Commissioner, on this common situation that, especially in government departments, in ministries, when a new political leader comes, the expectation, not even issues of misconduct, is that you get rid of your top managers, your head of department, for instance, which takes the department back, let alone the negative impact it has on service delivery. How does one use steward leadership to ameliorate such trend? Because I also feel that steward leadership has not been canvassed much, or maybe I have not heard much about it. Hence, I felt I must join today. We are only taught about the laser spheres and everything, but when you come to steward leadership, it's more of a component that we haven't much heard about. How do I use this one to ameliorate such a trend that I spoke about? Thanks, Prof.
Thank you. Thanks, Maketsi. Commissioner, if we can just take another 2, we've got Elsie Patiswa, and then she will be followed by Andre Young, and then we'll go back to the Commissioner. Sis Patiswa.
Thanks, Prof, and good evening, everyone, and good evening, Commissioner. Thank you for that input. My question is linked to some of the issues that have been raised, but I'm just wondering, you're talking about your true north and being authentic and being ethical, but this one is more on the organizational perspective, because the work that you do, much of it is about, if you look at what is going on with the money that gets collected by SARS and where it goes, it has become more of a grudge contribution from the side of the citizens. But you have a pragmatic responsibility to meet your obligations, and that citizens must contribute whatever they need to contribute or whatever is expected of them. But looking at the mismanagement of these funds that you collect, when they go to where they are supposed to be spent to the benefit of the citizens. How does that affect the moral legitimacy of the mandate of the institution itself? And how do you motivate your staff to continue doing what they need to do, knowing that what is happening out there affects the moral legitimacy of the institution? Thanks, Commissioner, and thanks, Prof.
Thanks, sis. Thank you very much, Patiswa. Over to you, my brother, Andre Young.
Thank you, Professor Mazwe Majola. Good evening, Commissioner. I have a simple question. With the systemic shifts that are happening at the moment, Ed, and the paradigms that's coming out of that, how are you making sense as revenue collection in this systemic shift? How are you making sense? How are you preparing for this metamorphosis required in revenue collection in terms of this transformation? How are you becoming future fit, complexity fit, transformation fit? And how are you activating and amplifying this to stay ahead? Because when I look at the value shifts that are happening and the exchange of value that's happening, I get a sense that this job of catching this animal, of how do I catch all the value and all the transactions, make sense of them, and then do responsible revenue collection. How are you staying abreast? I'm trying to figure out, in the hot seat that you've got, how have you learned to dance?
These are all highly complex questions, and I think Professor Majola will have to come again, and I promise next time I'll do a more comprehensive. What I would like to share with your network is the entire journey, the strategic journey of SARS and what we have done so far, and we are work in progress, so we would certainly not claim victory. I want to deal with Dr. Mangiswa's question first. I understand Herzberg's theory, the whole theory of hygiene factors and motivational factors. And let me also say, I'm the first to express absolute unconditional empathy with the struggle, the economic struggle of all South Africans. And let me tell you, SARS employees are privileged. They are privileged in many ways. That notwithstanding, there's a few important things that I want to say to Dr. Mangiswa. First of all, Dr. Mangiswa, you are listening to a sliver of the real conversation and engagement that takes place on the ground between myself and my permanent shop stewards. In fact, many of the people who speak on the soapboxes don't know what's going on in SARS. They are not, and I'll say this publicly, they are exploiting the situation at SARS to serve their narrow interest. And they will challenge me when I say so, but I say so unapologetically. We live in a season that is politically charged. It's emotionally charged. We know what's happening in the country. We know how the ruling party is factionalized. We know we're heading into a December conference. SARS has in some respects sadly become one of the tools to further some of those aims. I tell it to the people's faces. I said I'm not perfect, but I tell you that I'm authentic. I never lie. And so this is my truth. Within our organization today and yesterday, I had very constructive conversations with my trade unions. They have heard the same message from me from the first day I walked in, that I accept them as true partners. And I invited them to walk and work with me. I also told them that this traditional age-old demand and adversarial relationship is becoming less relevant for us. And I don't want our employees to become irrelevant. And rather than nickel and diming for another percent, why don't we stand back and say, how do we reconceptualize our entire value proposition for our employees? And not just this, I want 12%, you can only do this, and then you weigh each other down. I can tell you now we have almost 13,000 staff. I can tell you that 70% of them are at work. I can tell you that of the other 30%, about a third of them are actively striking. But that makes the headlines, that makes the news, right? You don't hear from the 70% who is hard at work, committed to the higher purpose orientation. You don't hear from them. My trade union shop stewards, they understand the constraints. They understand that unlike a CEO, our CEO of Alexander Forbes, there I could decide how much money I want to put on the table for salary increases. I could enter the negotiations with a mandate. I have no mandate. SARS is allocated funds. And when National Treasury makes no provision for salary increases, how do I put an offer on the table? And so what I did successively for 2 years in a row, and my trade unions will tell you that, their bosses won't, but the ones on the ground who work with me will tell you, they understand my constraints. Because I've been transparent with them. Last year, I opened my books. I said, this is how much money I've received. This is the salary bill without anything else. These are the projects we have to do. Our discretionary money is very little. And then I said to them, last year, the amount was about 260 million rand. I said, let's talk about how we use the 260 million to improve life. This year, that amount was 70 million. I said, let's talk about that. I can tell you now that we're going to find each other. They also know that the strike is hurting their members more than what's hurting SARS. And of course, it's frustrating some taxpayers, which we are absolutely, when we drop the ball, it pains us. And I wish I had a magic wand to make that go away. So we will find each other. And we will draw this to a close. Because my colleagues in union, in labor, I've set them a challenge. I said to them, you're going to be hard-pressed to demonstrate that you are more invested in the well-being of our employees than I am. And I challenge you to find a single instance where I have not acted in the best interest of our staff. Last month, our staff received a bonus. I get staff members who mail me every day and say, Commissioner, we know you only have 70 million. Why don't you implement it unilaterally? Because some of us don't believe in the strike. I say to them, because I respect the processes. And I want to bring everyone along. So I can tell you now, what you hear on the soapboxes isn't what's happening within SARS. We will collect the revenue that is due, and we will do so knowing that we serve South Africa. I'm not sure if that was the perfect answer, but that's an answer from my heart. The Maketsi asks a great question, and that's also with Kieswetter's question in terms of the grudge payment. I'll leave Andre Young's question to the last because it's a very philosophical question, and I'm not even sure I know what the answer is, but I think aloud. You know, South Africa, there's a Netflix series that if you want to really know how a mature democracy works between political office bearers and administration, it's a short series. It's called Borgen. It's a Danish series on how you build a stable administration led by capable and competent directors general or permanent secretaries or heads of entities, and politicians come and go. Politicians are seasonal. They are elected office bearers. But those who serve in their day job should build institutional integrity that gives a democracy its sustainable performance. And it doesn't sway with political ebbs and flows. Sadly, South Africans believe that if a new minister comes in, he or she brings in her own DG, they want to bring in their own advisors, their own chief of staff, and if we continue that, we will never build a competent civil service. If we continue with deploying people because they are politically aligned with us, rather than because they are competent for the work they do, South Africans will continue to suffer the way we are suffering at the moment. So I'm unapologetic to say I am a meritocrat. I believe that you appoint people. Of course, we have transformational objectives, and I'm deeply invested in that. But you do the person a disservice, as well as the institution, if you place them in a role they're not ready for. I told you about my junior board initiative. That's about being ahead of investing in young people so that the next generation can be stronger. I spoke to you about my investment in women in leadership and other initiatives to strengthen our bench strength, because no organization should be at the whim of an individual. We should build a strong leadership system. And unfortunately, my sister, South Africa does not do that. And so what often happens is a new CEO comes in, a new DG comes in, a new minister comes in, they clean out the entire house and bring in their own people. When I joined, I shared with all of the leaders that I will not start a witch hunt. There were certain whose names were mentioned in the Nugent report. I called them in, I said, I'm going to start a process that respects your dignity. I'm going to keep you involved and we'll see where this goes. But until such time, you have a day job, I expect you to work. When we dealt with 5 individuals and they exited us after a few months, I then went to the rest and said, now you are here. And the only thing that's going to keep you here is not your past, but how you perform now. We started a process of evaluating and matching people with roles more competent, and slowly but surely we built a leadership strength. The top 70 leaders I work with directly, they're not all perfect, but they are there, and my engagement with them is to help them succeed. And so I resist the temptation of being like a bull in a china shop, but at the same time confront individuals who continue to undermine the organization, but provide as much continuity as we can. On the grudge payment issue, as I said earlier, and that's one of my biggest challenges. And I can tell you, thankfully, the only reason why SARS was not completely destroyed is because amongst its ranks are thousands of men and women who have the ability to rise above the current context and are guided by a sense of higher purpose. And that is probably the best endowment SARS has. You know, people who work at SARS, they can work in the banks, they can earn double their salaries. I struggle to hold back my tears when I do long service awards. People who have been there for 47 years, people who have been there for 35 years, people who have given their life to the service. That's the biggest endowment SARS has. And we work hard. I wish I had time to talk to you about our employee engagement model, the 5 rights that every employee has. And I can tell you that that's really what inspires me when I wake up, that notwithstanding those factors which you quite rightly say can erode the moral legitimacy, we have staff who, despite what's going on in our country, are single-mindedly focused to deliver the mandate that SARS is expected to. And I'm deeply appreciative of that. Andre Young, there's a number of issues. Let me start personally. There isn't a day where I don't want to run away. When I took on this job, my family said to me, "Are you mad? You don't need this job for the money. You can happily retire. You've got your university involvement. Why do you want to?" And let me tell you what they say to me. My boys, I have 2 adult sons. They say, "Dad, why do you work for an incompetent and corrupt government? That's what they asked me. So there isn't a day when I don't look in the mirror and say, what the devil gaan aan met jou? But then I look at the faces of the people who benefit from the work we do, and I draw strength from that. There isn't a cookie cut answer to your response. It's a struggle. It is, I have to deal with my own emotions every day and then present myself as one who can courageously lead even in the time and in the face of all the adversity we follow. And not everyone continues to support you. There are those who undermine, and there will always be those. I can tell you now, don't believe that state capture has ended. Within SARS, within the NPA, within the police force, within the Hawks, there are still people who are captured. They just keep below the radar. In the last 3 years, I can tell you we have dismissed people, we have suspended people, people have resigned, we have recreated an anti-corruption unit that deals with the integrity of the employees of SARS to ensure that we address that, we call it out. So this cauldron of emotions, I can tell you, I live with every day. What do we do to try and, so I have a few objectives because I'm there for another 1 year and 10 months and I'm this time retire properly. But there's a few things that I want to set for myself as objectives. The first is, I don't think that by the time I retire in less than 2 years now, that we would have achieved what I set out to do. But what I would hope to do is we would have laid a foundation on which the next generation of leaders can build. Secondly, I will know that I will not have persuaded the entire 400 of the deep leadership of SARS to buy into the vision. But I would hope that I will have built a critical mass so that there's enough people in the leadership system that can withstand a future commissioner who may come in with a corrupt intent or with an alternative agenda. I want people to have the courage to stand up to corrupt leaders and not to become compliant or complicit. So that's my second objective. First, lay the foundation. Secondly, build a critical mass of leaders. And then thirdly, the hardest work in any organization, but which is the most sustainable, is I want to ensure that there is enough DNA of integrity within the organization. And DNA is the hardest thing to fix. You can fix IT, you can fix processes and structures, but DNA speaks to the hearts and minds of people. And as a leader, you can't fake that. You have to be that for people to accept it. Because you know, human beings don't remember what you tell them. They remember how you make them feel. And every day, those are the objectives that keep me going. I want to close with you and share with you some of the encouraging. So you would know, for example, that the biggest arbiter of our success is the revenue numbers that we see. I'm going to show you a story that tells a wonderful depiction of the early successes that we are busy seeing. And as having said that, as I said to you, I don't anywhere am close to declaring victory. This is a 25-year graph of SARS's revenue performance. You can see that first period from about 1996-7, when the SARS Act was promulgated. We went through, and I was privileged to be part of that journey. From about 2004, I joined. We built some significant capacity in the large business center. Pravin Gordon then asked me to be the chief operating officer. And you can see how our revenue performance peaked And then in 2007, we produced the first budget surplus in the recorded history of South Africa. And then sadly, we had the 2008 financial market crisis. So you see the red 4.2, which was the recession in the year. We came through that and started turning that around again. And then sadly, we saw from 2014 the capture of SARS. You see the downward performance. So if you want to see the rand value of the capture of SARS from just a tax revenue perspective, there it is. And you can see that we then dipped again during that period. And then we started rebuilding, and then we had to deal with COVID, the little invisible virus. And thankfully, we have now, through the virus in many ways have actually accelerated our work. And so you can see those distinct phases of the financial market crash in 2008, then the capture of SARS, which started the decline from 2014 and bottomed out in 2017 and 18, and then slowly how we are climbing that out. If you want to know how successful SARS is, then I share with you this data point that last year, our revenue grew by over 25% in an economy that only expanded nominally by 12%. I can also share with you that last year, we grew 15.3% compared to the pre-COVID year, which means we have wiped out the deficit that COVID has inflicted on us, and we're on a path of positive revenue growth. And we say this with great humility, that the foundational work we do will hopefully go beyond the time when I will once again hang up my boots and find more time to play with my grandchildren and drink red wine. Thank you, Professor Majola.
On that note, wow, Commissioner, yes, you know, I think for tonight it will be probably best that we leave it here, and we thank the Commissioner for a wonderful presentation, very insightful, very instructive and informative. We have learned so much from you, and really, and thank you so much for that commitment of coming back again. I will engage with your office and we'll try to see if we can bring you back again, because as you can see, we are, as I said earlier on, we are a community of leaders, so willing to learn from each other. And there's so many things that you have taught us tonight about the subject, stewardship, leadership, but also about SARS, about what is happening there, because we are outside, and these good things, we need to know what is happening there. And thank you so much, really, for that. We're looking forward for another or the next session with you, and God willing, it won't take long. But on that note, I would like to, on behalf of our platform and our colleagues, to thank you so much, Commissioner, for availing yourself and for empowering us tonight the way you've done. Ladies and gentlemen, the session is closed now. We'll meet again next week, Wednesday, as we always do. Thank you so much to all of you, and in particular to those who joined us for the first time. Please do join us again next week as we grapple with this leadership, very important topic. Thank you so much. God bless you, and see you again next week. The session is adjourned now. Thank you.
Thank you very much all. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Halala, Ed. Halala.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.